Our next video is about formatting, and in a spreadsheet we can format cells individually, or ranges, or entire rows or columns, or in fact an entire worksheet. So we can we have a lot of choice. Now by formatting I mean you can change the look of the labels, labels, numbers, and formulas. So you can change the font, you can make it bold or italic or red, or change the shape of the letters, change the font itself to be fancy or Gothic looking, or whatever that you like. But when it comes to numbers and the results of formulas that work on numbers, we can also change things like, should it be dollars and cents? Should it be a percentage? Should it be a date or a time? We'll wait a little bit before we do that. But if you recall, dates and times are actually numbers to Excel. So we'll come back to that in a few weeks. But that idea is still there. Now, before we get to actually changing what the cells look like and formatting things up to make it pretty, we'll also look at changing the widths of columns and the heights of rows. We've worked with the spreadsheet for a while now, and we still haven't been able to see all of column A. Money from, what is money from home? We can always see it in the formula bar. If you click on a cell and you don't see the whole value there, you can always go up to the formula bar and see that it's, that cell is actually entertainment. Probably could have guessed that, but we didn't see it right away. Now if you want to change the width of a cell or the height of a row, we can just hover the mouse between two cells, between two columns I should say, between two column headings, between A and B here. Notice my cursor changes from, normally it's a big plus sign. In the middle of a column it's going to be a downward pointing arrow, meaning select an entire column, but in between it changes to this sort of move left or right cursor shape. And if I click and hold, I can change the width of a column. I can make it wider, and I can make it narrower. If I want to make it just wide enough, just double click. Now notice it always works on the column to the left, and if I was to make a row higher or taller or shorter, it's the same idea. It makes the row to the above wherever my cursor is changed to this little move back and forth. So in between 4 and 5, that means if I change anything, it's going to change row 4. If I want to change row 4 just to be high enough, I'll double click it. Oops, I scrolled there using my keyboard, my scroll pad by accident. Alright, now if I have many columns that I want to auto fit, I can also select them. So maybe B and C I want to make just wide enough. To select those two, and inside anywhere between two columns, if I double click, it'll make both of those cells wide enough. So it actually shortened column B and it widened column C. If I want to change my entire worksheet, all of the columns to be, usually you don't change rows that much, but we often change the widths of columns. I want to change the entire worksheet, then a sheet 1, remember a worksheet is one of these tabs down here. Change it all at once to be just as wide as it needs to be. I can select the entire worksheet. I forgot to mention this in selection, but to select an entire worksheet, it's this little box just to the left of A and just above 1. If I click that, it selects the entire worksheet in one go. If I then double click between any two column headings, between C and D, between A and B, between F and G, doesn't matter, it'll automatically make them the right width. Hang on one second. Okay, we're back again. Sorry, I thought somebody was knocking on the door of my little basement bunker here. So I can change my widths and my column heights. The easiest way is to double click or select the entire worksheet, make every column just as wide as it needs to be. Now, this sort of brings up a funny point in formatting. Sometimes we have a cell, for instance A1, student budget. It's not that long, but what if it was student budget for some guy named John Smith? Notice how it's a label. It will automatically, if there's nothing to the right of a label, it would automatically spill over into the next columns. Now that's fine. So it does. If there was a number there though, so if I typed in number 45, notice how it doesn't say it gets cut off. But if I delete my 45 by selecting it with the mouse and then hitting the delete key, it automatically spills my label over into the columns to the right. Very helpful. But this means if I do an auto fit for column A, if I want to make it just as wide by double clicking between column A and column B, if I double click here, notice what happens. It makes it wide enough for everything in column A, including my huge long title. So I'll show you a little quick way of getting around this. If you've got a long, and it usually happens to title rows, if you have a long title row that you don't want to affect the width of the column, I want my column to really be just this wide. So I can do it this way, but anytime I double click, it's going to go right back to where I was before. And that can be annoying if I have to undo that because I accidentally double click over and over again. What I can do is I can select a few cells along the top row, say the width of my entire table that I'm working on, which is column A through column E right now, because column E has the numbers total that I'm working with. If I select all that and then hit this button here, this is on the home ribbon, and this button here is called Merge and Center, which means take all of those cells, A1, B1, C1, D1, E1, I think that's how many there were, and turn them into just one cell. So if I click that and then center whatever's in the middle, if I click that, it takes all of those cells and merges it into just one cell. Notice the outline. There's just one cell here. This is all A1. It's always the left topmost cell when you merge multiple cells. So that is still A1. There is no more B1, C1, D1, or E1. Those have disappeared. So you can't do this if there was other things in those cells, but you can if they're empty. So I've put it there. I've centered. If I don't like centering it, I always make it left aligned again. Again, here up at the top, this is with formatting. I can left align the value of cell. I can right align the value of a cell, but I'll change left align. Now I can double click between A and B all I want, and it will make it just wide enough for all the values that are in column A. But notice that my title still is long because it takes up cells A through E. It's not affecting any of the rows below when I do a width calculation. So it's the smallest of things, but that actually turns out to help if you have a cell label that is very long. Now, one other thing I should mention about making cells or columns wider or more narrow. So I can make it wide, I can make it narrow. If you make it too narrow, see, I have all these numbers. If you make it too narrow, you'll get an odd effect. Keep making it more and more narrow. Suddenly, it'll turn to what we call in computers crunches, or number signs or pound signs, whatever you prefer. And it will only do that. Notice the label is September is just shortened down to SE and a tiny bit of the P. But all the numbers have disappeared. If there's not enough room to show a number, it turns to a pound sign. So if you ever see that in one of your own worksheets, that's what's going on. You've made the column too narrow. It still has room for the 0 here in car insurance for September, but it doesn't have room for the other numbers. It can't just show part of the number because that would be misleading. So I need to make this a little wider. So 450 for salary in September. If I made that too narrow, it couldn't just show me 45 because that would be misleading. The number is 450, not 45 or 4 if it was that narrow. So it turns to the pound sign. So you see that? That's what's going on. Double click, oops, and we can get the full September 450. Notice it even got rid of some decimal points. That's not misleading really. 622.75 becomes 622.8 as I narrow it. Becomes 623. Notice how it's automatically rounding the way we normally round. But if I make it any shorter, to show me 62 would be misleading, so it shows me a pound sign. So I'll just double click to get back what I had before and see the full September and all my numbers. So that will happen to you occasionally working through spreadsheets. Just make the column wider if you see those pound signs. Now if you want to change the formatting of a cell or a range of cells, you could just make a selection. So maybe I want these to be bold. I can select and I can hit the bold. Or maybe I just want that entire row to be bold. I can select, hit the bold button. Now notice how September is now not wide enough, that column, because bold letters take up more horizontal space. So I'll just take my entire worksheet by clicking that little button to the left of A to above the 1 to select an entire worksheet and double click between any two columns. You'll notice you'll do that over and over again. That's why you may want to make this title span multiple columns. I may want to make the title bigger. I can select some of these other buttons, make the font a little bit larger, make it bold, make it red. Notice how it's not wide enough now, so maybe I won't make it quite so big. I can make it span more columns if I like, but it won't automatically spill over once I've merged a bunch of cells together. I can make this cell bold, or this. I can make this one cell bold. Now you can use the ribbon, or from any cell you want, you can also, if I make a selection, I can right-click on it and choose Format Cells. We'll also see a bunch of formatting up here, very much like what I'd see on the ribbon, or I can choose the Format Cells button and get a whole list of things I can change. Font, I can put borders around, I can change the background color, make it blue. So there's, I've made the background of my cell blue. If I don't like it, undo, Control Z. So that's all about the look of things. I will mention that it's very handy often to put lines. So maybe I want, this is my sort of row headings, or my column headings, income, August, September, October, and total. I can put right here, there's a little box, a little sort of grid with a bottom row that's colored in. If I hit the little arrow beside it, I see a bunch of other selections that I can choose, such as a thick bottom border or a double bottom border. And that will automatically put a double border underneath whatever cells I've chosen in my range. I would advise doing that last. Once you've got your whole worksheet done, do your borders last. And when it comes to autofill, we'll see why. Because the autofill will also copy the borders, and that's generally not what you want to happen. So my general advice is do formatting and spreadsheets last. Don't do it maybe right now. We haven't done much with our spreadsheet. We've done a couple of calculations using the auto sum button from last time or time before. Do the formatting last. Now, there's a couple of other things to point out about formatting. So maybe I want all my numbers to be dollars and cents. No, so not just random numbers here, sometimes with 2 decimal points, sometimes here with 1 decimal point, sometimes with no decimal points. I want them all to be, and I want them all to have a dollar sign and have 2 decimal points after to signify my cents. Now I can do it just for these numbers if I like, but I can also do it for the entire worksheet. I could just say, you know, whenever a number appears in this worksheet, make it dollars and cents. Labels will be unaffected. School supplies is a label. It's just text. It's not numbers, so it's not going to format it as dollars and cents. I don't have to worry about that. But if I want all my numbers to be dollars and cents, I'll select my entire worksheet. And again, I can choose right-click, Format Cells. Maybe that's where I'm going to go. That's a good spot for all my formatting options. And when you're formatting numbers, you go to the Number tab here under Format Cells. There are other ways of getting here, including some of these buttons here on the ribbon bar, which I can't click right now because I have this pop-up window in place. I can just click the dollar sign to make it a dollars. But here is the full control version of formatting cells. So you right-click on whatever selection you've made, and you can choose and go to the Number tab, and you can choose, okay, I want it to be a number. Here's some examples of what it's going to look like. Currency. Now here's where I'm going to get my dollar symbol. There are other dollar symbols. I won't go through them all, but of course pound and yen and the common one, euro, but many international symbols. 2 decimal places for dollars and cents. Accounting is a slight variation on currency. I think we'll always want to use currency, but you can use accounting. Accounting just left aligns the dollar sign and puts negative numbers in parentheses. So if you're used to accounting spreadsheets, that's what they're going to look like. But we use currency. But you'll notice you can also do percentages, fractions, if it's possible to make a fraction of something. Scientific notation, which uses the E. So it's always, so for instance, I have 298.78. That would be 2.9878 E3, because it means E, it means times 10 to the power of 3. Sorry, 10 times 10 to the power of 2, my mistake, times 100. Anyway, scientific notation, and you can also do custom ones. But we'll just go with currency, say OK. It will automatically change all of my numbers. Notice the labels say the same, but all of my numbers now have the new formatting that I've chosen for number, which is currency values. So, wonderful. I have everything's got, maybe it's too many dollar signs to look at, but we can deal with that. But I do have cents for every one of them. Notice also, if I type in any new numbers, if I type in 67 here, it's always going to be a dollars and cents value. What happens if I type in 66.989898983 or 2? Well, I'm just going to see the rounded version, but actually under the covers, it's still storing all of my decimal places. So if I go to the formula bar, I can still see what I originally typed in. So Excel won't lose any of my precision. It's only precise to so many decimal places anyway, but for us, for our purposes, it's not going to lose any of our precision. But the formatting means it's only going to show to so many decimal places, and it'll round to that number of decimal places. So while my real number is 66.989898, it's just going to show me 66.99 because it'll round up to the nearest decimal point that I'm displaying. In this case, only 2 decimal places. So Excel will always do calculations based on what the original value of the cell is, but it may only show you so many decimal places based on what your formatting is. And you can pick how many decimal places you want. Up here, for instance, this means show me fewer decimal places, so 67.0, or show me more. Notice the column will actually get wider as I do that. But I've only got this one cell selected, so my formatting will only affect that one cell. I can change it to percentage, change whether I want the commas to appear after thousands, like we have here in 1,200 for 1200 and 1740. There's lots of choices we have there. But that's what's formatting. We can change colors, we can change backgrounds and so forth. Later on we'll see more formatting, but it's something that people play with. I don't think we really have to go into it too much in the introduction. But the easiest thing is to make a selection, right click, and you've got a whole bunch of options for my selection here: the font, the size of the text, borders, decimals, number signs, or I can go down to here, format cells, and get full control. Number alignment, you can do wacky things like make your numbers go at a 46 degree angle there, and you get something like that, which is unpleasant to look at, so I'm just going to say undo to go back to where I was. I don't like these 2 little sample numbers that I put in, so I'll just make a selection, hit delete, and they're gone. So lots of little things we can do with formatting. Don't forget, if you've got long titles or long labels, you can merge the cells so that they won't affect your wrapping. And anytime you want to make all your cells just as wide as they need to be, you can select the entire worksheet by clicking this box here. In between any 2 column headings, you can double click and it will automatically make each column as wide as it needs to be and no wider, which is very handy. Alright, when we come back, our next video we're going to talk about naming, which is a special technique.